Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Liam, at the FSA Tweets on Twitter. Rich, bring it straight over to you because we've got a jam-packed episode. How are you doing, mate?
I'm very good. Yeah, we should probably mention that we're recording this on the 20th of March. If anything mental happens to the six guys we're going to discuss over the next 2 weeks before it goes live, obviously we weren't to know.
Well, yeah, as Rich said, pre-recording because he didn't tell you the reason because he's taking 3 weeks off of the Dynasty podcast. So we're having to do a bunch of episodes early because Rich doesn't want to miss out. But we'll throw it over to our very special guest that we've got. Rich, you had him on the show last season, and I know you have a special message for him, so I'll hand it over to you to introduce him this time.
Yeah, so joined us today, we've got Dave Wright, who you will probably more likely know as at FF_Spaceman. He is a writer for DLF, the co-host of the Tale of Two Rivals pod, and as I describe him, the creator of the greatest spreadsheet ever made. In his weekly NFL database. It's a funny story because, well, perhaps funny for me, not so for Dave, but we did a podcast last year, sort of introduction to analytics in Dynasty, and honestly, my internet connection was so awful. I think it was some would describe it as torture for an hour. Basically, Dave tried to have to guess what I was saying because he couldn't make out a word I was saying. So it was, yeah, I'm pleased that he's come back because it obviously wasn't that bad an experience last time, Dave.
Look, I appreciate the apology, but I'm totally comfortable now because you guys are already making excuses for what happens if things go wrong in the next 2 weeks. I am this confident that whatever I say here will be golden. You know, it's analytics, right? Whatever I'm going to say is absolutely 100% right. So I can see into the future. I'm ready to go.
Perfect. There we go.
Right.
Let's kick off, Liam.
Let's get straight into it. So, Dave, I don't know whether Rich did this last time round, but we brought in a little bit of a thing where if we have a guest on, we ask you a few questions to start off with. Easy ones, you don't have to start sweating. We're not going to ask you some sort of maths question or anything along those lines. So how long have you been playing fantasy football, mate?
I don't think I have enough fingers and toes for this, but I think it's 21 years this year I've been playing for. So I started my freshman year of high school. So back in like 2001, I think. So yeah, started playing the Yahoo public leagues and then moved on to my family leagues and then started playing with high school friends. And then the rest is kind of history. And then I would just wind up here where I'm not that many leagues, probably like 12 total, 15, maybe including redraft. So.
And then I suppose the other question is, how did you get into producing content for fantasy? Because as Rich said, you've got this greatest spreadsheet of all time. I'm a massive fan of spreadsheets, so I'm going to have to check this out after this. But how did you get into producing content?
So my first job out of college was working with it's at a school with individuals with disabilities, and a lot of my coworkers were like around my age, and there was actually quite a few men that I was working with at the time, and then they were all super into sports. And in my quest to demonstrate my sports knowledge and my superiority over my coworkers, I had to find an edge in fantasy football. So I'm not sure if you guys were playing back then, but Yahoo had added Roto World. They had integrated it to the site, so they were getting news updates. They never used to. So you had to do your own grunt work to find injury updates, coach speak, beat reporter stuff. And then once it all came onto Yahoo, that edge was gone of doing the extra work, and every was on the tip of everyone's fingers. And I had to find this edge against these coworkers because I was like living and dying by my sports knowledge at the time, personally. So then I went and I found a couple podcasts. I found Matt Kelly's Roto Underworld podcast. I think it's his third or fourth episode he ever did. So that got me really into trying to find the skeleton key, the supposed skeleton key, or advanced metrics had the answer to everything. But I actually became a worse fantasy player because of it. I didn't have any clue what I was doing. I was, I think I drafted Charles Johnson, a Vikings wide receiver who was cut by Green Bay in like the 4th round of a redraft league because, breakout age. I made a lot of mistakes, but then, it was a quest to get better and better. I came across Peter Howard and I started asking him a ton of questions about like what is market share of air yards, all these different questions. and he had his own database. And I finally got tired of asking him questions and adjusting his spreadsheet the way I wanted to. So my wife, we were working different schedules, the exact opposite schedules at the time. So I had a ton of free time. I spent like 40 hours a week creating my own spreadsheet for a year, mass like over 2,000 players, dating back to 2000. And then actually to wrap the story up, I was actually on like just in their on the live chat for the Dynasty Crossroads Peters podcast at the time with Jake Anderson was a co-host back then. And I won the Scott Fishbowl entry as a listener. I was a very avid, loyal listener. And that got me like 300 or 400 follows like a week before I released my database, and got a ton of eyes on it. And so I owe a lot to Peter and, for inspiring me to want to create spreadsheets, and then also getting me into the Scott Fishbowl and getting eyes on my work. And I had actually a couple sites wanted me to come write for them right after I released it. And then the rest, a year and a half later, I was running for DLF. So, and I'm here with you guys now. So
it sounds brilliant, mate. I mean, I love a good spreadsheet, and Rich speaks very highly of it as well. So I really am going to have to check it out after this. So
it's not just one, Liam. There's three. There's plenty of different spreadsheets. It's Dave's. Yeah, I don't want to embarrass Dave, but it's some impressive work.
I am going to have to check it out. But enough about spreadsheets, because that's not what the listeners are here for. We'll dive into our running back positional preview for the 2022 rookie class. We've got some names here. So, Dave, I'll throw it straight over to you for the first one. This guy has been a darling over the past few weeks after his combine performance. He's been absolutely incredible from an analytical point of view, just based on those workout numbers. It's Breece Hall. Dave, what can you tell us about Breece Hall right now?
So the way I kind of approach prospecting is I try to create like tropes or archetypes that I know I'm usually these analytic nerds, they create their models and stuff. I actually have not had a lot of success with models. So I try to just create these archetypes and try to describe how I think they're going to produce in the NFL based on their, like how they're going to score points in fantasy. So I look at through, age, volume, touchdowns, receiving ability, the size, athleticism, and also some efficiency too. So that's kind of how I break it down. And Breece Hall checks all those boxes. He's young, 21 years old, very, very good size at 6 foot 217. That's a nice running back build for the NFL. And he was a workhorse in college, 2 seasons, over 20 carries per game. That is exactly what we would like to see, especially from a young declare, early declare. Having 2 seasons over 20 carries per game is special. And he had over 60% of his team's rushing attempts those final 2 seasons. So that's a really healthy workload. And he had 130 scrimmage yards per game, which just really gets me excited. That's not only did he get the work, but he's also produced with it and had over 20 TDs in his final 2 seasons. Like I could just keep going and going here, but then the real feather in his cap, 3 seasons over 20 receptions and a final season of 36 receptions. Like he does it all. So he can handle the rock, he can catch the ball, and he's athletic, running a 4.39 40, great vertical leap and broad jump too. And he's, even getting a little bit deeper. His efficiency is a great breakaway run percentage, over 46% and 53% in those 2 seasons, which shows me that he has some dynamism, some explosiveness to his game. But he also has a good juke rate or evaded tackles per touch of 28% in his finals, or he averaged that. So he does it all. So efficiency, volume, receiving ability. He's going to get the draft capital and athletic. Like that's Breece Hall. He's already in my top 5 RBs in Dynasty right now. Wow. That's how good he is for me.
Yeah,
I know you're dying to jump in.
I'm loving hearing this because I've been all in on Breece Hall for the last 3 months, and I feel like I've been standing on an island saying, everybody's saying, "Oh, 2022, it's a terrible class. It's a terrible class. Sell for 2023 picks," and it's like, actually, yes, it's a bad quarterback class outside of maybe one massive lottery ticket, but actually, I really, really like Breece Hall. I'm all in on Breece Hall. He ticks every box for me. That I have one of those rookie models that I play with it tends to be pretty good. It's pretty successful certainly across the last couple of years, and he ticks every single box that I look for. So running back breakout age, best receiving market share, yards per team rush attempts, weight adjusted speed score, and best market share touchdown percentage. He's above the 90th percentile in every single one of those. He's in the pre-draft model, he is neck and neck with Jonathan Taylor in terms of how good he is as a prospect. And then when you go across and watch him on film, I don't know if I've ever watched a player in college that looks so comfortable running the ball. And what I mean by that is when I watch him, it looks like he's just not putting any effort in. And I'm liking this to my other sport that I love in terms of cycling. And, you know, you talk about beautiful cyclists and it's where basically they're going uphill at a ridiculous speed and it looks like they're putting no effort in. That to me is Breece Hall. He's outrunning guys to the edge and getting down the field, but it looks like he's just cruising. And I could watch him run all day, and I have got no concerns about him at the next level. I'm all in on Breece Hall as a prospect. I think he's going to be fantastic.
So, Rich, did your model change much with the combine results, or was he pretty up there with those combine results?
Yeah, he was already very up there. I was expecting him to drop down slightly once because the only combine measurable I add in is the weight adjusted speed score. So I wasn't expecting him to run basically as fast as he did. So when he ran as fast as he did and he stayed up in that 90th percentile mark for that, it was the final box ticked. I'm as Dave says, I'm very much all in on Breece Hall. I'm all in on Dave as well, yeah.
I'm glad, else we wouldn't have him on the show. So do you both have him at rank 1 then for this rookie class? For the running back position at least?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, he's a clear one and very much in the tier of his own. To be honest, even if I know there's all the kind of grinding the mocks and mock draft database, and they seem to have these sort of top 3 running backs in a bit of a tier in terms of where they're expecting him to go in the NFL draft. And I think even if he was the 3rd, maybe even 4th running back off the board, as long as he gets that day 2 capital, I think he's still going to be my 101 in terms of running backs.
How about you, Dave? Does draft capital come into the equation for you for Breece Hall? Is it only if he goes way under what you expect?
Yeah, he's got to go in the 3rd round for me to start to pause because then maybe there's like a character thing I don't know about, or that the NFL isn't telling us about. But I'm telling you that I'm so in the Superflex draft, startup draft. I'm willing to take him at that 1-2 turn. That's how he's in the conversation there. I might not, because I usually in a startup I like to do, I'll trade back and acquire more assets or start with wide receiver or QB, but he belongs in that conversation, that 1-2 turn in a startup, in a Superflex redraft, or Dynasty. So
can I play a little game with you then, Dave? If I can. So if you said he's your top 5 in terms of where you've got him ranked at the moment. Yep. So Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, straight up. Who would you take right now?
Yeah.
Wow. And I presume
running backs, like I've done a lot of work on running backs. They score the majority of their points early on in their career, like age 21 through 23, 24. That's when the majority of their production comes from. And that also is where the biggest gap from their ADP is to their production. So by the time the ADP catches up to their production, a lot of the time they've already peaked. So I like to invest early and be ahead. And, sometimes it flames out and it doesn't work, but you get the exponential value gain that you get from investing in these running backs at a young age, while other people are investing in the injury prone years or things along those lines. It can change a dynasty roster. Breece Hall can change a dynasty roster. That's how good he is.
Okay, I've got a question for you. Javonte Williams has a lot of hype around him at the moment, especially with the Russell Wilson trade. Where do you have him compared to Breece Hall right now?
So Javonte Williams is my 4. So the way that this kind of breaks down is Najee Harris comes in at 3 and DeAndre Swift is at 2. And that's that one. That's a 1 tier, right? That's my second tier. Jonathan Taylor's in his tier of his own. But Najee Harris, if Breece Hall gets a early 2nd round or late 1st round draft capital, he will jump. Not both Javonte Williams Breece Hall will jump Najee Harris in my rankings.
Okay, so jump up to your RB3.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, all the people that have been selling 2022 picks for 23 picks are clueless at the moment, is what we'll say.
This is pretty. I feel I wasn't actually prepared to be this hot, but I am now.
I'm all in. I'm fully with you there, Dave. I'm not sure I'm quite as high on him in terms of overall ranks, but I'll be honest, I've not put rookies into my overall ranks yet. So I tend to wait for draft capital to happen and then I'll chuck them all in together. But yeah, no, I think as a prospect, as I said, I've got no question marks in terms of prospect. I think he ticks every single box I look for. So I'm fully all in. And as I said, I love watching him. So no questions, no arguments from me.
I don't think you were going to argue, really, were you? Breece Hall being ranked highly. I think you're pretty safe.
Of course not. Of course not.
So moving on, we've got Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M as our running back 2 on this list. Although I'm not speaking for Dave here, but both myself and Rich have him as our running back 3 in the class. The reason we did it this way around is he was the majority of people's running back 1 or 2, and he seems to have slipped in the past few weeks. So we'll start with Isaiah Spiller here. As I said, both me and Rich have him as our RB3. Where do you have him, Dave, and what can you tell us about Isaiah?
So I have him as my RB3. I actually just changed it before the show started. I'm actually in an auction right now, and sometimes when you test your rankings, and it was like, no, I want Kenneth Walker more than Isaiah Spiller, and it's just Isaiah Spiller checks a lot of things that you want to care about. He's got, well, I'll just start with the top. He's young. He played in the SEC. He's got good size. He's just under 6 feet, 217 pounds, and Spiller he underwhelms from a raw volume perspective. He had just a tick under 19 attempts per game in his sophomore season, but he never eclipsed that 20 attempts per game in his 3 seasons, and he maxes out at 50% of his team's rush attempts in that sophomore season, but he averages 42% for his career. So now looking like 50% is totally fine, but it's not anything that gets you excited. Like Breece Hall, 60% of his teams, like he was the clear one. And you look at the players that were on Texas A&M, there's no one that like Kellen Mond stole a couple carries at quarterback position. And then there's some players I'm not even sure if I have in my database yet, like that are, I'm like, wait, this guy's taking carries from Isaiah Spiller. It didn't make sense. So, but also too, Texas A&M doesn't run the ball a ton. They're not a really run heavy team. They're like, for the season, they're right around low 400s in team rush attempts. And usually it's in the high 400s for a team in college. And sometimes they get that in the mid 500s too. Like Georgia had over 500 carries last year. So they don't run a lot. So I guess if you really squint, you can get over the volume concerns with Isaiah Spiller. And but then he also too, not a ton of touchdowns. No, they don't score a lot of rushing touchdowns again as a team for Texas A&M. But he eclipsed the 10. He gets 10 in his freshman season and doesn't get past that. But he did have 2 seasons over 40%, which is okay, but I'm not excited, but it's okay. And then, but the real thing that I wanted to put Isaiah Spiller as my 2 was his receiving. He's got 3 seasons over 20 receptions and 2 seasons over 25, which is the Zach Reed at TassAssassin13 on Twitter. His magic rule: if you catch that many in college, you're going to be a good receiving back in the NFL. So he's got that 3 down potential build that I care about as an archetype, but the volume wasn't there. And then he's got fine efficiency numbers too. Like he'll on Tuesday, so a week ago, where this is releasing a week in the future or whatever it is, the 29th, a week in the past was his pro day. So people have some questions answered them as far as his athleticism. But there are some whispers that his athleticism might disappoint. But in the SEC, he did have a decent breakaway percentage, over 40%, and then, 33%. Now I'm getting confused. 40. Yeah, sorry. These spreadsheets you get very confused very easily when you get passionate about this stuff. So he did have all 3 seasons over 40%. So he does have some dynamism and a solid final season juke rate of 33%. Actually, that's very, very good. So evaded tackles per touch. So he does it really well when he has the opportunity. He just was never trusted with that volume. So maybe that changes in the NFL. But not thinking that he might disappoint athletically and that might cause him to slip a little bit in the NFL draft, I have him fall to 3, even though I really like him as a prospect overall. And I really love that. I really want my running backs to have receiving upside because I do not want to be game script dependent with my running backs. I want them to be able to be game script independent. So if they're trailing, they can catch the ball. If they're winning, they can rush the ball. I want them to have the full picture and not be phased out of the game. But it's definitely a change from Breece Hall going to Isaiah Spiller in this conversation. Not as exciting.
So where would Isaiah Spiller have to be drafted for him to move back into your RB2 role?
He'd have to get well, honestly, it's the testing and the draft. Those are the two. Like, if you only had the one, like, oh, maybe he has the athleticism concern, but he's still going to get that great draft capital. I'd just shrug it off. I was like, oh, I love the receiving ability, but it's the athletic questions and the like. If he goes to the 3rd round, then I'm not. Then that's what it. So if he goes to the 2nd round and tests well, that would put him maybe tie for 2nd. Like at this, it's tough. Like he could go up to 2nd. He's not for me. He'll never get to that 1 spot.
Yeah. I suppose it also depends on where Kenneth Walker goes, who will be the next running back that we dive into. But before we do that, Rich, do you want to say anything on Spiller?
Yeah, I mean, Dave summed it up very well. I think for me, I try not to look at ranks or kind of read into people's opinions too much before I dive in, so that I've got a kind of a clear view in terms of my opinion rather than getting clouded by too many other people's. But when I watched Isaiah Spiller, I just thought he was a bit meh in terms of he was good, don't get me wrong. And, yes, I saw the receiving usage and I think he's good in space, but he just didn't look like a men amongst boys, which is kind of what I want from a running back in college that I think is going to be a stud in the NFL, in that he looked like a good college running back rather than kind of different level. And I get that part of that is that he plays in the SEC, but I do think that part of that is that people fall into this archetype of good SEC running back becomes good NFL running back. And I just think sometimes we overhype that SEC aspect a little bit too much. In terms of the rookie model side of things, he was kind of low in 2 main areas, really. So his best market share touchdown percentage and his best receiving market share were both low. His yards per team rush attempt was sort of 69th percentile. And obviously he doesn't have a weighted adjusted speed score. So he's reasonably low in the model. Didn't blow me away on tape, if I'm being honest, which is why he's kind of been settled in as my RB3 for a little while.
So with that, and with us hinting a lot about Kenneth Walker, we may as well move on to him coming out of Michigan State. By the looks of it, both myself and Rich have got him as the running back 2 on the class. Dave, I'll come straight back to you. What can you tell us about Kenneth Walker? I know that you hinted a little bit at him during the Spiller talk there.
Yeah, he's my RB2 as well. Wow, so much consensus on here. I might have to just flip it. We'll have some disagreement early on. I've seen the questions later on. We'll have some disagreement. But he's a young, 21 years old. Good. And the thing with Kenneth Walker, I also, like Rich, I try not to pay attention to what other people are saying, but sometimes you hear things, and when I'm putting in stats in my spreadsheet, I see like, oh man, he only really had 1 good season before I really dive in. I'm like, so he's a 1-year wonder. He transferred. He couldn't get it done at Wake Forest in my mind. And that's kind of what's going around my head. So I'm like, and he doesn't catch the ball very well. So that's what's in my head right now. I'm just like, yeah, of course I'll take the receiving back in Isaiah Spiller from the SEC over him. But then when I dive into it, I see that like he's young. He has good size, 5'9", 211, over 30 BMI. And then that final year when he did transfer from Wake Forest to, I think it was Wake Forest, but I'm pretty sure it was Wake Forest to Michigan State. He went over 22 carries per game, and so which is definitely passing my 20 carries per game threshold. And he, even in a non-inspiring year at Wake Forest year before, he still had 17 carries per game. And this is, we have to remember too, that we had the pandemic season where, you look at his raw totals and I think it's only 100 and something carries, but there was only 7 games for Wake Forest that year. So when we're prospecting, we have to make sure we're making an adjustment for the pandemic season for some teams, but not for others. and Wake Forest was there. So when you start looking at as a percentage of his team, he still had over 31% of his team rush attempts. And he had, I think, 13 rushing touchdowns at Wake Forest in his final season. So had a nose for the end zone. But then once he gets to Michigan State, he gets over 147 scrimmage yards per game in the Big Ten. And, and whereas, so almost doubles, or like 80% at Wake Forest, where he topped out at 87 scrimmage yards per game. So not only does he get the workload, he's efficient with it. He then scores some massive TDs. I think it was finals 18 last season for Michigan State 20. So you're telling me he gets a ton of work. He gains a lot of yards with that work, and then he can score TDs on top of that. That has my interest peaked. But then only 19 career receptions. But then this is when you start to realize that this isn't quite the exciting running back class as we've had in previous years. But then in the back of my head, someone tells me, hey, he had over 60 receptions in high school. So maybe it was just a usage thing, how he was used. And when you're getting 23, 24, 25 carries a game in the Big Ten, when are you going to, you have to rest sometime. You can't just play every snap and catch the ball. So that maybe that's, why you're being maxed out as a runner. So you can't catch the ball as much. He did jump up to 13, I think, receptions in that final season or around there. So that was at least something. And then to kind of wrap it up, he did have a 4.38 40 time and a 122-inch broad jump. So he's got some explosive athleticism. And I think he led out of the backs that we're talking about. He led with a 54% breakaway run percentage and a 33% juke rate for his career. So when the ball's in his hands, he can make it happen on his own. He can bust the big play and make people miss, which are at the pro level predictive of fantasy success. So, and I haven't done a ton of work at the collegiate level yet, but I would think that that's a good sign as well. So efficient, 2-down grinder type back with maybe some, 20%, like maybe the Derrick Henry's type. I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry, but how he got like 20 receptions in his the 2 years ago there kind of season.
So, Rich, is there anything that you want to add on to that? Dave is very thorough with his breakdowns right now. I'm just sat here taking it all in, just listening to this. But is there anything you can add on top of that?
I like Kenneth Walker. I think that's probably about as far as I'd go. I think for me, this shows the tier break and quite how big it is between him and Breece Hall. When you say Kenneth Walker's my 2, it sounds like I'm really hard on him, but actually, in a normal class, he'd probably be my 3 or 4. I think there is a significant gap between him and Breece Hall. To me, the Wake Forest thing doesn't sit okay with me. If a guy is, an NFL talent, and I get that there was some potential issues, he says that he didn't get the opportunity to showcase his skills and that kind of thing. But if he's as good as I potentially think he could be, and he showed he was at Michigan State, I can't get my head around why he didn't get a chance at Wake Forest at all, basically. I think that he ticks a lot of boxes in terms of when he's got the ball in the hands. I think he's electric. I think he's a versatile runner. I think that he's not one of these that's going to be scheme dependent for the running game, which I think opens up the potential for a lot of good landing spots. I agree with Dave. The lack of receiving usage is kind of a question. I know that seems that everybody's favorite knock on him at the moment is he can't catch, but actually when you look at his kind of receiving market share, it's actually pretty good. And I think it's just a case of the offenses he was in didn't really utilize running backs in the passing game at all, which I don't know if, we had the knock on Jonathan Taylor when he was coming out that he couldn't catch because he didn't. And yeah, he had it, he hit, as Dave said, he hit the 20, the Zach Reed rule of 20 receptions in a season. But I think Kenneth Walker, to me, he's a good, solid, volume-based RB2. And I don't know if he's ever going to be more than that. So I think that if you can get him at the back end of your first round of, a normal rookie draft, sort of super flex, probably, happy with that. But if you're expecting him to be a league winner, I don't. For me, I don't see it from him as a player.
I think it's a little unfair to say he did nothing at Wake Forest, like he did, because he did have 17 carries a game. He had 40% of their team rushing yards, and 13 rushing touchdowns. Now, yeah, you would like, it's Wake Forest, you'd like more, but it wasn't like he was just a total non-factor. You know, was, at least he did something. It was, you know what I'm trying to say?
I'm being a bit too harsh there. Yeah, I understand. I'm probably being a bit too harsh. It just feels like, if he's the talent that he's kind of being held up to be in terms of a potential, NFL second round pick and that kind of thing, I'd expect him to be doing an awful lot more than that with the volume that he did get at Wake.
I went in feeling the same exact way, honestly. That's how my initial thought. Like, I went in biased that way, honestly. That's how I felt.
I'm glad you called him out on that, though, Dave. That's giving me some thorough enjoyment there.
It's semantics, really. It's like it wasn't like a huge difference, but
that's made Liam's week. That is, Dave.
It has. I love it when people disagree with you, Rich. So let's move on. Rachaad White is the next guy that we've got on our list. Currently in DNF rank and ADP is the running back 4. That is also where I've got him, and it's the first disagreement of the show, guys. Apart from that little bit about Wake Forest there. Rich has got him at 5, so a little bit of a disagreement between me and Rich. Rich, can you tell me why you've got him a bit lower down than I have?
I think that I worry that he gets pigeonholed. I think that he's a very good back. I think he has the potential to be, a very good back in terms of fantasy production, because he does have that fantastic receiving profile. But I worry that the NFL are going to view him as I hate saying Nyheim Hines and James White, because I feel like that's the easy cop-out comp. But that type of player that is a satellite back rather than a full 3-down back. I think from a model perspective, he was a late breakout. He didn't have great kind of market share touchdown percentages. His weight adjusted speed score is okay. It's not incredible. I just think that he's, for me, lacks that elite ceiling, which is why I'm probably a little bit lower than consensus.
What about yourself, Dave? Who do you agree with ranking-wise, or are you miles away with either of us?
No, he's my RB4. Yes, and I like Rachaad White, or Rashad, however you pronounce it. I have no idea. The spreadsheet doesn't tell me how to pronounce things, but I'm not going to say Rich did present, I agree with everything Rich said as far as how he's painting it out, but his upside, I think, is that 10 to 12 carries per game with that 6-7 targets a game. So he, I don't think he's Alvin Kamara, don't get me wrong, but the idea is that he can fall into that Alvin Kamara type workload. He's got the size, he has the requisite speed, 4.48 at 2. I got so many windows open here, at, what was it, 214 pounds. So that is a decent, it's not a home run type speed, but it's definitely requisite to get break a big play. And I think too, sometimes what I don't use running back breakout age because running backs is a little bit different in that their volume isn't always earned the same way. It's more kind of a coaching decision given, whereas targets, you're not necessarily scheming up you're not like scheming up, hey, I'm going to throw to Amari Cooper here and then CeeDee Lamb here. It's not like that. Whoever's open gets the ball more often than not. Whereas running backs, the coach decides who to put him in, what player to put in, and it's earned to a certain extent because he goes practice and everything, but there's a little bit less pure talent to decide what gets a player in here. And also, what I found with modeling with the RB breakout age is that JUCO players and with that kind of career path kind of get lost. He had a different path to the NFL than a lot of prospects. A lot of times harder path to get noticed in JUCO and then come in at, I think, Arizona State or wherever he was. I can't remember now, but so he goes in there and gets the 16.5 rush attempts per game in his final season, which it's not where I need it to be, but it definitely, with his receiving ability, where he had 43 receptions for almost 500, like 450 yards. That is what you compare that, or you combine that with the rushing ability, And that's how you get a real fantasy weapon here with the requisite athleticism and the size. And then he only, going back to Rich's point about like, yeah, rushing wise, I've also heard people say he's a little bit of an upright guy, and you can kind of see that he only had a 31% breakaway rush percentage, which is maybe he's not explosive running the ball here, but he did have 25% career juke rate. So while maybe he's not breaking the big play, he's still making people miss and gaining some extra yards that way, which I like to see here. And so let's wrap it up. I think his receiving ability, if he gets the requisite draft, like, so if he goes in like round 3, oh yeah, give it to me, baby. But the fear is that he is a day 3 pick, fourth, fifth round. And then you've got to hope for an injury and you got to show out to really get that opportunity here. But he's a player. It just shows you how significantly this draft class drops off compared to others.
I think just to kind of confirm and agree with a lot of what you said, in my notes I've comped him to what people dream Chase Edmonds could be. Is his ultimate upside in terms of the receiving usage and the rushing usage. I think what people are hoping Chase Edmonds is in Miami. That's where I see Rachaad White's kind of ceiling in the NFL, and I don't know if I want to spend that higher draft capital on what I perceive that to be.
He's got 10 more pounds. He's 10 more pounds heavier. So it's a little bit different type of back, than Edmonds. But yeah, that's that's how he's going to score his fantasy points. And I agree with you there.
So Dave, I'll throw it over to you first. A bit of just a random question. At the moment in rookie drafts, if you're doing any normal snake or normal linear format, where would you be taking him? Roughly, it doesn't have to be specific pick, but you're taking back end of the second.
I'm back end of the first round. If depending on where these QB, like say if Matt Corral gets top 15 draft capital, that's going to push Rachaad White down. If the QBs get decent draft capital, some people are talking about Sam Howell as a day 2 pick. If that happens, then that's going to push Sam Howell down. But basically, where these QBs go in the NFL draft is really going to decide if Rachaad White's going to go in the end of the first, the early second for me of my super flex drafts. Probably I'm not going to take, I don't have to take him in the late first, but I'm not going to. So I'll say early second round for me.
Rich.
So for me at the moment, I've got him in one QB. He's 12 for me. And in super flex, he's 17 for me.
Okay.
I should
just
say
a random question.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
And just I didn't say this earlier. I want to say Kenneth Walker is my RB8 right now in Dynasty. That's just to show you how low I am on running backs in Dynasty in general. But if things go right with draft capital and everything, he's going to be, I think you're going to see him be a low end RB1 in a lot of Dynasty rankings.
That's quite interesting, actually. That running back 8, that is quite interesting.
I feel like I need to go away and start trying to slot the rookies in these. As I said, I normally try to wait off till draft capital, but Dave's got me wanting to go and play with it now, so I might go and spend the rest of the evening trying to do that.
So this is actually, I know we're off the tracks now.
No,
but I want to say this is actually one of the best advice I have to Dynasty players, because what you see is rookies rise up in ranks from February to like May when rookie drafts start to happen. They continually rise up in ADP ranks and everyone's ranks because people have to do the work. They have to integrate them into their, put them into their rankings and instead of having a separate rookie and Dynasty rankings. So consistently year after, this has been a trend for 5-6 years. January, starting in January drafts, rookie ADP always rises. So it's always a bet if you're in an early Dynasty draft to invest in rookies. So like Breece Hall, people had him probably as an early like an RB2 a month ago. He's now probably everyone's low end RB1 or like a low end RB1 but he will be a mid RB, like he'll be everyone's RB7 or 8 or higher come May, because that's just how people, it doesn't, and it's not because people are buying the rookie fever. It's just they finally get more comfortable and as they get more information, landing spot and stuff. So I highly recommend, as soon as you get your work done on these, is to try to integrate them, because that's where you can make a significant value gain on your dynasty rosters by investing, going out and trading before people realize Chris Olave might be actually good. So go out and get him for a mid-second.
You don't need to be telling me that Chris. I'm all in on Chris Olave. Maybe we're teasing it a bit too much, but I'm far higher than I pretty much guarantee most in the dynasty community on Chris Olave.
I had him ahead of Jameson Williams before the combine. So
let's just tease this, Dave. I've got him ahead of Treylon Burks. Yeah,
and that I saw that too, and because that's actually kind of why I brought up Chris Olave, because that had was sticking in the back of my mind here. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You can, because Chris Olave is going to get first round draft capital, and he's going, or an early day 2, and he's going to rise up ranks. Yeah. And if you're ahead of the curve on with these rookies, that is where a significant value gain can be had in dynasty. That's, if there's someone can take away one thing from the show, is to invest in rookies, even just invest in rookies, because the exponential value gain, even when you miss, you can still get out of it later on, because there's always someone who's willing to even if you're going to lose, someone always wants to take that second. Terrace Marshall still gets 3rd round picks.
Yeah, I have too many Terrace Marshall shares, so I'm going to move off that one. Let's move over to the other running back with White in their name. That's Zamir White. College was Georgia. So again, I agree with DLF ranking and ADP, whereas Rich has him at 4 in the class. Rich, again, I'll throw it straight over to you, mate. Do you want to tell us why you're a bit higher on Zamir White than we are?
Look, first of all, I want to caveat this. I'm a Georgia guy, so I'm always gonna be slightly higher on Georgia running backs. I'm lower on my Jets players, but I'm much higher on my Georgia players. So take maybe this with a pinch of salt. Look, the reason I've got him there is, for me, with the way this class is shaping up at this point, I'm purely punting for complete upside, and I see Zamir White as the one guy that I wouldn't be gobsmacked in this class has the talent to be elite. And once I get past those top 3, that's the guy that I'm looking to draft. And I think that you got to look, he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He's a 2-sport athlete, that second sport being track, which is, who doesn't want a track star for a running back? The big concern is obviously he had those 2 fairly horrific ACL tears, but I just think that he's got the potential to be incredible. And he certainly showed flashes of that at Georgia. He never really got the backfield to himself, which, we've seen happen plenty of times with other Georgia backs over the past 10 years. They tend to have some pretty good ones to share the backfield with. And I just feel like the upside, whilst it might be small, is higher than anyone else in this class outside of those top 3, which is why I've got him ranked 4. And I'm literally just punting for that kind of elite potential, because I just think that there's a glimmer of hope. And we know that the NFL guys and NFL front offices love those 5-star recruits, and they're willing to give them much more of an opportunity than a 3-star athlete as such.
So, Dave, the all-important question: do you agree with me again, or have you got him a bit further down your rankings?
Yeah, he's my RB 8 or 9. I'm a hater.
Oh.
So,
I get it though, because I think from a profile, he's never really put it together. It's, as I said, it's just purely a flashes guy.
So I have to make a manual adjustment for Georgia, because that is their recruitment. Their recruitment pitch is, hey, you're not going to be overused at Georgia, because we want you ready be fresh for the NFL. That's like their pitch. That's how they get a lot of these elite running backs. They say, hey, we're not going to grind you to dust and use up all your valuable carries until you get paid in the NFL. So that's part of the pitch here. But what I think people are thinking too much is oh, that's how Georgia's always done it. And then they could think about, well, Nick Chubb, had to share a back. The thing with it, one is that, all right, I'm going to start, before I get into more of this stuff, I want to talk about Zamir White a little bit first. He's older. He'll be 23 years old by week 2 of the NFL. So it'll be 22 draft age, but it'll be 23 very early in the NFL season. Great size good size at 6 foot, 214. But he was from a volume perspective, he was a committee back in college, never eclipsed 15 carries per game because he was sharing with James Cook. I think, is that the famous guy, James Cook, or is that the actual NFL running, I think it was James Cook.
Dalvin's little brother.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think who the Captain Cook was, but anyway, that's a side story. Anyway, I'm nerding out. Obviously, I blacked out and started nerd out there, but I'll get back on topic here and say he did have it. So really, he didn't get over the 15 carries per game, and only 60. He averaged, I should say, not never, but he averaged 60 scrim yards per game. That's not a lot. But he did have a good nose for the end zone with 11 TDs in 2 seasons. But then 17 career receptions is a real death blow, where I think if everything goes perfect, he was just this amazing runner, but this is how Georgia used him. And we don't have to worry about those injuries. And he does work his way up an NFL depth chart and everything goes perfectly well. He taps out at a 2-down grinder, like a 2-down grinder. Despite having that impressive athleticism that Rich talked about. And again, never eclipsed 30. I think he had 35% breakaway rush percentage and at 23% juke rate, which isn't that great. So his efficiency isn't great on top of not getting a lot of volume. And getting back to the Georgia piece. Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, they all had over 200, Nick Chubb had over 200 carries, over 1,000 yards in multiple seasons. And they were going up against DeAndre Swift. Sony Michel were in the same backfield. Zamir White has James Cook, who's just a guy, in my opinion. He's maybe James White. There's not the impressive list at Georgia stealing touches like it was for Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift. That's where, and then even when they had that kind of competition, they still put up insane counting stats and in very good percentages of their offense. So I understand that the upside in getting excited about Zamir White because there just aren't that many good running backs in this class. But I just can't get there. I just can't get over that jump of the Georgia piece of, hey, he could go the Nick Chubb, Sony Michel route, but the talent that he had to compete with just wasn't there. Yeah, he had 1 year of DeAndre Swift. So.
Yeah, no,
not to hate.
Not at all. I think, look, as I said, I've probably watched more of Georgia than I don't watch a lot of college football, but I watch more of Georgia than most other teams, and I think maybe I'm buying into the flashes too much, but I just think for me the way I'll certainly like to play is once I get to that, early third rounds and beyond in rookie drafts, I'm just buying lottery tickets, and I'm basically going to draft as many running backs as I can, but I'm drafting guys that have got the potential to blow up. And at that point, I don't see many other guys in this pool that have got that potential to take over a backfield and be an elite producer like Zamir White. And yeah, I'm probably buying into those small flashes and the athletic profile and the college profile coming out, the high school profile coming out. But I just think that if he gets it right at the NFL, it could be special. And if I'm only having to pay probably an early third at most for all that, I'm quite happy to take that risk.
I agree. Early third or the third round is where you want to be targeting in drafts. Take him over some of these long shot wide receivers. I agree there 100%.
So we'll move on to our very last one with that agreement. We won't keep that going too much longer. So, Rich, you're going to have to help me out with this name, mate. I can never pronounce it. I'll let you introduce the next guy. I think its official name is Twitter darling Tyler Algier. Dave, what do you make? Are you buying in with the rest of Twitter as it seems?
He is my RB6, but that's as far as I'll go. He's just another guy for me where I'm hoping that he gets on a good depth chart, and he's an injury. He's not, maybe he'll be in a committee and then there's an injury and then he gets a stretch where he can produce because he does have a profile. Well, in his final year, he had a final year at BYU where he had over 20 carries a game. He caught a ton of passes and scored some touchdowns. So like he's got that 1 year of being all purpose back, which is exciting, but that's about it. I'm not getting, he's not like I'm not excited about Tyler. I don't understand. I think a lot of people's hype died with his 4.60 40 time. They were hoping for something at 4.5. Now I will say, I think the 4.60 at what is he, 222 or 224, I think, whatever his size, he's a bigger back. That is good. Like Ramondre Stevenson ran a 4.65 at 231 pounds. So they have almost the same exact speed score. Tyler Algier is a little bit more. So, and we saw Ramondre Stevenson look plenty fast enough, had some big plays. That speed is at that size is good enough. But the draft capital, he's got to surprise up with draft capital. That's because we got to see some NFL intention that they want to use him and feature him in an awful offense. Otherwise, he's got to luck into it, or just because that's what happens with a lot of these players is they luck into it. And now I like it when he does luck into it. He has the potential to score you a lot of fantasy or a decent amount of fantasy points because he can do it in all three phases. But that's about as excited as a Tyler Algier as I can get.
So before I sort of offer my thoughts, Dave, I've got a question for you about, I guess, BYU, but potentially other traditionally strong, should we say, offensive line schools, in that BYU is traditionally held up as this fantastic offensive line school. They normally get slightly older players coming back, which is why their offensive line is usually pretty good because it's sometimes men against boys. Do you count that against Algier, potentially against other schools, because BYU has that traditionally great offensive line, or does that not come into the equation at all? Or?
Honestly, it doesn't come into the equation for me a lot. I know one reason why BYU has older players is because that's it's a Mormon school where they go on a year, they do some missionary work, and so a lot of players come back later. I was actually surprised. I actually was surprised that Tyler Algier was only 22 or going to be 22 draft age because he felt like because I always look at these BYU players. I think, he's going to be 23, 24 years old. He's only 22. So that's about the extent that I get it. Now, I remember when I was diving in on Zach Wilson, they did not play a lot of people during that COVID year back in 2020. That schedule was light, very juicy schedule. And I don't even think Tyler Algier did that much in that year. Off the top of my head. Yeah, he only 13.6 rush attempts per game. He did have 1,130 yards, but against a very juicy schedule. So I did downplay it, just meant a little slight downtick, but it wasn't. I don't have for Georgia, I make a mental note that I have to make a manual adjustment because of how they treat the running backs. I don't do the same for BYU. Okay. That was a long answer. Sorry about that.
No. I appreciate it. As I said, I was keen to pick your brains because I think that, it's like when you look at Iowa and Wisconsin and colleges like that always have those great offensive lines. It's like, do you count it as a slight negative for the back that they have these powerhouse offensive lines? But for me, I just don't really fall in love with Algier. And I think that, yeah, he's a big, powerful back. There's some great highlights of him trucking linebackers and breaking tackles and things like that, which, it's always great to see. But I just don't see that ability to separate. I think that he's at best probably a 1B in the NFL, and I quite liked you sort of mentioning Ramondre Stevenson. And I think that's what Stevenson was last year is kind of potentially all you could ever really hope for from him. I just don't know if he's ever going to be a true bell cow. I don't think that he's got, whilst yes, he's got some okay receiving work, it was mainly dump offs and screens, and there wasn't really much nuance in terms of the route tree. I just don't think he's going to get that work in the NFL, if I'm brutally honest, from what I saw. So yeah, he's someone that, as I said, if he's there in the third round, I'm quite happy to take him, as I'm quite happy to take pretty much any running back at that point. But he's just not somebody I'm excited to go and draft.
So, Dave, I've got a on the spot question for you. Looking at, because I've been recording your rankings as I've gone through, just so I make sure I've got them noted if I ever need them to go back on. But you haven't got a running back 5 in this class in this list. Who is your running back 5?
Brian Robinson from Alabama. Yeah, that's nothing sexy, but he's got the size. He's probably gonna get the draft, like day or round 3 draft capital, decent, like requisite athleticism for his size, and he can decent enough hands. Nothing sexy at all, but he's gonna, like, the idea is that he's definitely a safer bet in my opinion than Tyler Algier.
That makes me happy because I've got Brian Robinson ranked ahead of Algier as well.
Sounds like you're both agreeing after some slight disagreements earlier.
Well, we had to disagree at some point, didn't we? It was too much like an echo chamber at the beginning.
It makes for a good show.
I came in planning on disagreeing so much because of how rudely I was treated in that last episode, last year, with how I had so much resentment, and it actually came off a lot nicer than I wanted to. I'm so ticked off. Come on.
Well, I hope this show has been a lot better than the last one for connection issues, apart from Rich telling you an earlier time than it actually was, or at least in our minds anyway. But
I feel like daylight saving time in the USA is that's a niche knowledge for a guy in the UK. I apologise for getting that wrong, but you cut me a bit slack on that, Liam.
You know that I love throwing you under the bus, mate.
I'm telling you guys, the number one platform in the US, if you want to be elected in government, is to make Super Bowl Monday a holiday and to eliminate daylight savings time. And I guarantee you that will combine all of the strife across our country, and that's a candidate people get behind are those two things: Super Bowl Monday off and no daylight savings time.
I think people in the UK would completely agree. It's completely annoying. I read an article the other day that said apparently it was the Scottish Farming Union that was causing the reason why we can't change it to get rid of it. So there you go.
I don't think they're holding up the US ones, are they? That'd be some power if they did. But Dave, it was great to have you on. Where can the lovely listeners find you?
You can find me at FF_Spaceman on the tweet machine, and you can find my writing over at DLF. I took a little bit of a hiatus there as my baby Spaceman was born back in August, and I've with the draft season kicking up, I've put out 2 or 3 articles already, and I'll have 2 more coming out this month. And then also you can find all of my stuff on my Patreon, FF_Spaceman on Patreon. But the majority of my content is free on Patreon. It's just a place where I can keep everything and people can go find it. There are some specific benefits that I've started to add a little bit more. I've included my tiers and rankings for exclusive for patrons. I'm halfway through creating a patron exclusive database that includes the breakaway run rates, the juke rates, the targets, and the things to my prospect profile or my prospect database, which Rich kind of alluded to at one point, but over 2,000 players. And then also my weekly database, which Rich has mentioned a couple times, is free, and you can find that there. So lots of other databases, but that's where you can find most of my stuff. And I have a couple exciting, and then you also Tale of Two Rivals, my home for podcasting, where I love to banter with my friend Todd. And but yeah, I'll have a couple exciting things I think launching over the summer that I think people can stay tuned for. But yeah, besides that, this has been awesome, guys. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm in the midst of a UK tour right now. I think I have 5 UK podcasts, I think.
Wow.
This is step 2. So I don't know what it is. People can't stand me in the United States, but UK, they haven't caught on to it yet.
Mate, we've loved having you on, and Rich spoke very highly of you. Where we're looking at guests to bring on this season, or this off season. So that says everything you need to know.
Can I just jump in and say I am a patron of Dave's, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is the work that he puts in, and it saves me so much time rather than having to trawl through websites and pages and quite frankly find all the data myself. I just go on Dave's spreadsheets and it's all there. He's an incredible guy, and it's fantastic work, and I thank him. So yeah. Anyway, I'll stop buttering up Dave, and we can hopefully get him on again next year.
So A plug from us at 5 Yard. We've got about 4 articles currently with me for editing. I've just been sent another one. So we're going to have an absolute week. Probably, in fact, as I say this, I know that this is going out the week after. So ignore that plug completely.
If you're listening to this, go back and check out last week's articles on the
Yes.
sites, because there's some fantastic work being done by the writers.
They probably corrected Rich and I's mistakes throughout the episode. So that's probably what those articles are.
Perfect. Rich, any plugs from you before we say goodbye to the lovely listeners?
No, if you're listening, there's still a few tickets left on the UKFFC. Hopefully, it's sold out by the time this goes out. But yeah, go and get your tickets. It's going to be a fantastic event, and I hope to see you all there in London.
Well, as Rich said, keep an eye on the 5 Yard Rush website. We'll have a lot of Dynasty content going out over the next few weeks. But until next week, when you listen to us pre-record yet another show, because Rich is going to Florida, I'm not going to let him live this down. We'll see you all then. That's all, folks. Have a great week.